They say betrayal whispers before it screams. For Aduni, it began with a phone call, soft, trembling, and heavy with the weight of another woman's secret. "I'm pregnant." He says his wife could never know. Those words fell like stones into still water, each one sending ripples through the fragile calm of Aduni's world, shattering everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and justice. Because the voice on the other end of the line was Blessing, and the man she spoke of, the one begging her to stay silent, was Dr. Adebayo Gundimu, Aduni's husband. Blessing was a nurse at Lagos University Teaching Hospital. She'd been having an affair with Dr. Adebayo Gundimu for 8 months. She wasn't the first, and she probably wouldn't be the last. But she'd grown tired of being a secret, tired of watching him go home to his wife with gifts bought with guilt money. "I'm pregnant," Blessing whispered into the phone. "He wants me to take care of it quietly. He says his wife could never know, that it would destroy his career, his reputation." Aduni listened with the detached calm of someone whose capacity for shock had been completely depleted. As Blessing spoke about hotel rooms and conference trips that were really romantic getaways, about promises of love that were never meant to be kept, about a pattern of infidelity that stretched back to the early months of their marriage, she felt something dying inside her that wasn't grief or anger or betrayal. It was her ability to believe in justice. Here she sat, being questioned about the death of a man whose only crime was showing her kindness, whose only sin was making her feel valued and understood. While her husband, the real adulterer, the actual betrayer of marriage vows, slept peacefully in their bed, probably already planning his next conquest. The ring on her finger felt like a shackle now, cold and heavy with the weight of misdirected divine justice. When Dr. Adebayo Gundimu returned from his latest emergency surgery, which Iduni now knew had been a 3-day affair with a pharmaceutical rep in Abuja, she was waiting for him in their living room, still wearing the clothes from Dr. Emeka Chukwu's funeral. "How was the conference, my love?" she asked, her voice eerily calm. "Exhausting, but productive. You know how these medical conventions can be." He moved to kiss her forehead, but she pulled away. Do I really know how they can be, Bayo?" Something in her tone made him pause, made him look at her with the first genuine attention he'd paid her in months. What he saw made his blood run cold. Not anger, not tears, but something far more dangerous. Absolute clarity. "Aduni, what's wrong? I look like a woman who's buried an innocent man, while her guilty husband stands free." Her voice never wavered, never broke. "I look like a woman who's been wearing a curse disguised as a gift, who's been punished for sins she never committed, while the real sinner sleeps peacefully in her bed." The words fell between them like a gauntlet thrown down, and Dr. Adebayo Gundimu felt the cold weight of exposure settle on his shoulders. "I don't know what you're talking about," Blessing called. 2 words, 2 simple words that ended their marriage as surely as if she'd fired a gun. For a moment, Adebayo said nothing. Then, because guilt makes cowards of even strong men, he tried to lie his way out of the trap his own behavior had built. "I don't know any, Blessing. Someone's been spreading rumors, trying to hurt our marriage. She's pregnant." This time, Adebayo's silence stretched long enough for the truth to fill it completely. "How many others?" Aduni asked, still in that terrifyingly calm voice. How many conferences that weren't conferences? How many emergencies that were really hotel rooms? How many times did you come home to me smelling like another woman's perfume while I wore this cursed ring, thinking I was protecting our marriage? She held up her hand, showing him the silver band that had cost an innocent man his life. Your mother gave me this, said it would keep us faithful to each other. Do you know what it really is, Bayo? It's Magun, the thunder god's justice. It kills any man who touches a married woman in adultery. Adebayo's face went white. He knew the stories, had grown up with the whispers about traditional justice and supernatural punishment. But he dismissed them as superstition, as the kind of backward thinking that education was supposed to eliminate. Aduni, that's impossible. You can't seriously believe Emeka is dead. The first crack appeared in her voice. A good man, a kind man, a man whose only crime was making me feel valued and appreciated. He's dead because I wore this ring while you were betraying our marriage with half the women in Lagos. The full horror of the situation hit Dr. Adebayo Gundimu like a physical blow. His infidelities, his mother's meddling, the ancient justice that didn't distinguish between the guilty and the innocent, it all came together in a perfect storm of cosmic irony. I didn't know. No, you never meant for me to find out. You never meant to face consequences. You just meant to take whatever you wanted while I sat at home, faithful and foolish, wearing the instrument of punishment for your sins. She stood up, pulling the ring from her finger with a sharp twist that left her skin raw and bleeding. Keep it, she said, dropping the silver band at his feet. Or give it to your next wife. Maybe she'll be luckier than I was. Maybe she'll only have to bury her own guilt instead of someone else's. In the weeks that followed, as Aduni moved out of their home and began divorce proceedings, as the university rallied around her in the wake of her tragic loss, as the community whispered about the brilliant professor whose promising colleague had died so suddenly, one truth became crystalline. There would be no justice for Dr. Adebayo Gundimu. The ring lay where she'd dropped it, untouched and untouchable. He'd tried to pick it up once, thinking to dispose of it properly, but the metal had burned his fingers like ice, so it remained, a silver reminder of consequences that would never come, justice that would never be served. He continued his affairs, more discreetly now, but no less frequently. The guilt lasted exactly as long as it took him to meet his next conquest. Within 6 months, he was dating openly, telling friends that his marriage had been strained by his wife's academic obsessions and unrealistic expectations. Blessing had the abortion quietly, accepting a settlement that bought her silence and a transfer to another hospital. She was replaced in his bed by another nurse, then a resident, then a medical equipment sales rep, who found his sophistication irresistible. The community, when it thought of the situation at all, saw it as a tragedy. The brilliant doctor whose marriage couldn't survive the pressures of their demanding careers. Some even pitied him, this devoted healer whose wife had apparently been having an affair with a colleague and couldn't cope with the guilt when her lover died suddenly. The truth, like so many truths, was buried beneath layers of assumption and convenience. Aduni left Abadan, accepting a position at the University of Ghana, where she could lose herself in work and try to build a life from the fragments of her shattered faith in justice. She never married again, never allowed herself to get close to another man. The memory of Dr. Emeka Chukwu's death was a wound that would never heal, made worse by the knowledge that he'd died for her husband's sins. She threw herself into her research with the intensity of someone trying to outrun her own memories. Her work on the intersection of traditional justice and modern morality became groundbreaking, influencing a generation of scholars who never knew that her insights were written in blood and guilt, and the terrible understanding that innocence is no protection against punishment. Sometimes late at night in her small apartment in Accra, she would dream of Emeka. In her dreams, he was always alive, always smiling, always speaking of literature and love and the bright future they might have had together. She would wake with tears on her cheeks and the phantom weight of a silver ring on her finger. She never spoke of Magun in her academic work, never wrote about the traditional practice that had destroyed her life. That knowledge was too dangerous, too painful, too likely to be dismissed as superstition by colleagues who had never felt the weight of supernatural justice misdirected. But she never forgot, and in her teaching, in her mentoring of young scholars, in her quiet moments of reflection, she carried the truth, like a scar, that justice and righteousness are not the same thing, that traditional wisdom can be perverted by human weakness, that the innocent often pay for the sins of the guilty. Mama Kemi lived to see her son's divorce, to watch her daughter-in-law leave in disgrace, while her boy continued his successful medical practice. She attended his second wedding to a young nurse who smiled prettily and asked no uncomfortable questions about his frequent travels. She told herself she'd been right to intervene, right to protect her son's interests. The marriage had been saved from the scandal of infidelity, even if it hadn't lasted. The family name remained untarnished. Her grandchildren, when they came, would be legitimate and properly raised. But in her quiet moments, when the justifications fell away and she was alone with her thoughts, she remembered the look in Aduni's eyes when she'd dropped that ring. Not anger, not even hatred, but something far worse. The hollow recognition of someone who had learned that the universe is not just that good people suffer for others' sins, that traditional wisdom can be twisted into instruments of cruelty. She never spoke of the ring to anyone, never admitted her role in the tragedy that had unfolded. But sometimes when thunder rolled across the sky during dry season, she would remember the old medicine man's warning. Magun does not distinguish between guilt and the appearance of guilt. And she would wonder in the darkest corners of her heart whether the thunder god was finished with their family, or whether justice, Sango's justice, was simply taking its time. And so ends this tale of misdirected justice, my children, though its echoes ring still through the red earth of Yoruba land and beyond. For Aduni's story is not just one woman's tragedy, but a warning about the danger of assumptions, the cruelty of tradition perverted by human weakness, and the terrible price paid by the innocent for the sins of the guilty. They say the ring still lies where she dropped it, in that house in Bodija Market, where love once lived and truth came too late. No hand can touch it, no force can move it. It waits, patient as justice deferred, cold as righteousness misdirected. And perhaps, in its waiting, there is a lesson. For Sango's justice may be slow, but it is never absent. The guilty may escape earthly consequence, but the wheel of divine balance turns in its own time, grinding slow, but exceedingly fine. Some say that on nights when the moon is dark and the air is still, you can hear thunder rolling across clear skies in Bodija. Others whisper that Dr. Adebayo Ogundimu has grown thin with an unexplained illness, that his hands shake during surgery, that he wakes screaming from dreams he cannot remember. But these are only stories, only whispers. The truth remains hidden, like so many truths, beneath layers of respectability and convenient blindness. What is certain is this. Dr. Emeka Chukwu lies in his grave, innocent blood crying from the earth. Aduni carries her sorrow like a second shadow, her brilliant mind forever marked by the knowledge that good intentions can be weapons, that love can be a trap, that justice and truth are not always friends, and somewhere, in the tangled web of tradition and modernity, of ancient wisdom and human folly, the ring waits, patient, cold, remembering everything. Remember this tale, my children, when someone offers you gifts wrapped in righteousness. Remember Aduni, who wore her punishment for another's sins. Remember Emeka, who died for love offered freely and received gratefully. Remember that the thunder god sees all, but human hands direct his lightning, and in their direction lies either justice or tragedy, depending on the clarity of the eyes that guide the strike. And when the thunder rolls at last, we must answer not only for our own sins, but for the innocent blood spilled in the name of our righteousness. The ring that never lies tells truths we are not always prepared to hear. And sometimes the greatest tragedy is not that justice fails, but that it succeeds against the wrong target.